Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Okay, so you might not expect this question right after such a beautiful and sweet song, but just curiously, just for yourself, what are you afraid of? Just, again, not to speak out loud, but in your head, what are you afraid of? For some people, that's instant, like you know, and it could be a very specific situation. For other people, it might be just, it might be more subtle. It might be there, I'm basically good in life, and there's like little fears. I hear a lot of people talking about fear about the upcoming election. There's external fears, what's happening in our world, what's happening in your workplace, what's happening in your family, what's happening, how does that all, but we wouldn't feel fear if it didn't impact us. So what am I afraid of personally when all these things that might happen or might be happening now in your life? What is my greatest fear? So I'm just going to ask you to be with that question as we go through the talk today, because the talk today, we are going to be remembering our beautiful loved ones here and in your heart. Even if you don't have a picture up here, I know you have loved ones on the other side of the veil. For those of you online, you may have pictures at home that you want to put up and have a little candle with, or on your phone, but most definitely in our hearts. But before we get there, I'm going to review what we've been talking about all month, which is prayer. And we have a way of there's an order of prayer that we have in our community, not just this community, but in the Centers for Spiritual Living. And we've been talking about this, there's 5 steps to this prayer, and I've been talking about all the 5 steps, and today's the 5th step. But I want to add a little dimension to it. When we think of prayer, we think of a prayer that begins and a prayer that ends, that has a beginning and an ending and a very specific purpose. But as I review these steps, I want to have us look at it as a way of life, a way of being in the world, that we want to live a life of prayer. And the more we can live a life of prayer, the more we're going to start experiencing miracles, everyday miracles, where they're just normal, where we're experiencing the goodness of the divine presence every day in little tiny ways and in big ways. So can you do that with me? Just sort of listen to this from the place of a life of prayer. So our very first step is acknowledging that there's only, how many powers are there, by the way? One. Oh yeah, okay, good. One power. And this actually, I say that amusingly, but that's actually an extraordinary thing right there, that there's nothing other. So that's our basic principle. There's one power, one presence. It has many names. You all might have different names for it. Infinite paths to know that one power and one presence. But even regardless of the path, regardless of the name, it all leads to that same place, this one power, this one presence. And it is absolute. So that means that it is love without an opposite. It is good without an opposite. It's a good that never ends. It's a good that just continues on and on forever. It's been, for those of you who know, I've been sort of looking at the roots of Christianity. I didn't have a Christian teaching growing up, or a real one. So I've been looking at it, and so many people come to our community with sort of difficult challenges, often with religious communities, and there's a lot of good and evil, the fire and brimstone, or be afraid, and yet when I'm reading this mystic Saint Porphyrios, and it's like he's a member of this community. He's like, there's only good. If your spirituality is motivated by fear, it's not the right spirituality. There's only good, and it just keeps getting better, and it just keeps getting better. So you can be in any tradition, but the moment you start contacting and connecting with this infinite, invisible, all that dogma of fear and separation can't help but dissolve when we know the truth. We don't need to go to a teaching. We just need to go to that divine presence within us, and we know the truth. Right? I see Mike nodding his head. You know. We know when we connect with that presence. It is all good all of the time. So this is how we begin our prayers. We talk about this divine presence, its infinite nature that has no end and no beginning, the eternal nature of this presence, and that it is absolute. And then our second step is about unifying. As it is infinite, we are one with it. It's all who we are. I am that infinite life and presence. That there's no place where it stops and something else begins. That's another obvious one. I remember the first time I heard it, I'm like, yeah, I already knew God was infinite. But somehow it caught me like, oh, right. If it's infinite, it can't stop. It is impossible. There's no place where it can end. So it is in, through, and as all creation, including all beings. So that everyone here on the planet, in the room and on this planet, all sentient life form, the rocks and the minerals and the plants and the trees and the animals and the insects and the birds in the air and the sky and the billions and billions of galaxies, all of us are one in, through, and as this presence and this power. Now, there's an interesting thing about this idea of power. I usually talk about the presence or its infinite nature, but I want to just also mention how important this word power is. We don't often think about power and spirituality. One of my favorite books was Thunder of Silence, and there's chapter 3 is about power from Joel Goldsmith, because he just continues to come to this idea. There's one power that almost all of our pain comes from the idea that there's actually two powers. So even all of us in New Thought who've been learning on spiritual progressive path, we know there's one power, but what he was speaking towards is that, but subtly, we still have this idea that there's two powers, and we're operating in a world as if there's two powers. This is so amazing, when he just keeps calling you on it. And he said, throughout history, we're always having power to overcome another power. So you have the sword that's overcoming the stone, and then the bullet that overcomes the sword, and then the cannonball that overcomes the gun, and then the nuclear bomb that overcomes the cannon, and now we have chemical warfare, and we're just technological warfare, and there's always something about overcoming. And he said that's what people do with God, that the idea that they try to use their ideas of God to overcome the bad stuff. And he said, but when you realize there's only one power, there's nothing to overcome, because there's no reality, there's no substance to all those horrible and difficult things. And so if we start moving into the consciousness that's already in us, it's not out there, the infinite cosmos is inside of us. And the more we consciously work with this idea of oneness, that we're not trying to overcome anything, there's nothing out there trying to get us that's real. There might be fake things trying to get us, but there's nothing real trying to take us over and to beat us up. To really deeply walk through life knowing this process, this awareness that there's only one thing, and it's the only power, and it is always, always, always for us. This was revolutionary for me. So there's different types of people. I love all the various types of people, and I was one of the people who tended to be very worried. I had a lot of fear from the moment I was born. The world scared me. I was shy. I was introverted, and it was just way too loud. There was way too much to be afraid of, and all I wanted to do was hide in my room. And so over the years, and I remember as I was just anchoring myself in this one power, one presence, there's only one, and I just kept saying it and feeling it and meditating on it, and I was sort of withdrew from the world for 30 days and came out, and I didn't even realize it, but somewhere along the line, I realized I just don't feel fear anymore. I'm not where before I was afraid to talk to not talk to people just in general, but to anything personal, ask someone for something I needed. I was looking for a job. I was afraid to talk. And I didn't even know. I was like I just suddenly had this thought, I haven't been afraid at all for a long time. It's because I was anchoring in constant oneness. Everything was for me. There was nothing against me. See, this is the constant prayer. We don't want to we have our prayers that we do throughout the day, but then we have a life of prayer where we're constantly reminding ourselves we're in charge. We are the spiritual authority. Like we like to say, we are the CEO of our spiritual journey. If I want to live a life of prayer, it's up for me to remember I mean, it's great that other people may remind me, and I listen to go to Sunday services, listen to great music, read books, but I have to start owning it myself and reminding myself, oh, there's only one power. There's only one power. No matter what it looks like out there, and the more we know there's one power, things start to shift in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. We can't make. One of my favorite things that Ernest Holmes says is we only need to know the what, not the how. We keep knowing the what, that there's one power, and the how and the how starts to show up. So our third step is the realization. And the realization step in our prayer is about applying this one power, this one presence that is in, through, and as all creation, including all that I am and all that everybody else is. And then I address whatever situation I'm going through, whether it's work, whether it's a relationship, whether it's money, whether it's physical health, whether it's my spiritual journey. There might be issues there, whatever it is. And it could be multiple issues. We start applying this truth, this principle. Well, there's only one power, and so it's showing up in ways that I can't even imagine. My work life is responding and reflecting this goodness in my life. I see it happening as we evolving into this awareness in our external world. We talk a lot about politically correct, but what we're recognizing every time we open our heart to communities and beings that have been marginalized or invisible. So I might find a transgender person uncomfortable. I might find a person of another race or another religion or an ethnicity uncomfortable. But by opening up and seeing and feeling and knowing that they are an aspect of the one power, I'm actually getting to know myself more. When I cut that off, I'm actually cutting off a part of my soul. I'm cutting off a part of my true being. So the more we continue collectively to know one power and one presence, we're seeing it reflected in the external world, this awareness, oh, there's a whole bunch of people that we tend to have outside of who are in our periphery. Really poor people. We don't like to think about them often. You know, we know they're there, and we might give some money to a charity, but and that's not, we can't care about it. I mean, we have to have some people in our periphery. It's not like we can walk around caring about everybody, but we can be conscious of it. And so even if I pick those areas where I'm called to serve, but even the places where I'm not called to serve, I'm still knowing they're part of me, that one power, that one presence, and we are all operating. It's an entire universe working together. I love Reverend Michael says, we're a universe, not a biverse, a universe. We're all in this together. And so any place, one of my favorite definitions of spirituality, you might not know but there's many definitions of spirituality, but one of my favorites is anything where heart is open to infinity. And when our heart starts to constrict, then we're out of our spiritual, because we've cut off the infinite in our heart. So our work is to constantly open our heart up to the infinite. And so this gets us to realization and to gratitude that it's all infinite, that it is all part of this one power and this one presence. And so last week I shared a little bit about Raymond the Nunnik, who does artistic calisthenics. And he said the most remarkable thing, which is he considers the idea of heaven, when he said, when I hear that the idea of heaven is where everything is just, you have everything that you already need. He said, that sounds so boring to me. He said, I love I get injured, and so then I learn I have to work through that obstacle and focus on another area. I have one joint, and he just continues to create this artwork with his calisthenics, and he has obstacles all along the way. He has obstacles in his personal life, whatever. But he says, so that's all good. It doesn't bother me because I know that's what the joy is. The joy is finding and discovering new parts of myself that I didn't know that it was there, and they usually show up around obstacles. And he said, if I just sat and said, well, everything's already given to me, it's like, well, then what? That's not very exciting. That's not very interesting. So that's looking at it from a physical point of view. And so many people have had experiences, their crisis, and by opening up, discovered new elements of who they are spiritually, whether it's a physical health issue, emotional health issue, financial issue. We learn more, we expand more, it deepens us. And this is where we get into gratitude. So we have realization and gratitude that it's all good, that it's all part of this goodness. This power and goodness are one and the same, that it's not a goodness that stops. It's not a goodness that has a limit. It just keeps going and going and going. And so this can happen emotionally too. There are people who do find this world difficult. There are people, and you may be one of them. You know, I tend to be a little bit more emotional, and you know, there's degrees. I was listening to Glennon Doyle, and she was talking about just little things. She said, "Well, I was on." Glennon Doyle has a podcast, and she wrote a book, and most of it is about her challenges, about that she's tends to be a little bit afraid of the world. And she's very open about it. And she said, yeah, so we have a business meeting on Zoom, and we're all on Zoom together, and everyone's talking about the business. She goes, what I'm doing is I'm looking at my face, and I'm saying, does this look like a face that understands what's going on? Am I showing the right face? That's what I spend the whole time, because I have no idea what they're talking about. I completely phase out, but I want to make sure that I look like that I get it. You know? And I'm a success if they think I got it. And she's too afraid to say, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. You've lost me. So she just plays this game. She was having a conversation with Sarah Bareilles. You know who Sarah Bareilles is? Broadway singer, just a singer in general, Grammy-winning singer, Broadway singer, wrote the music to Waitress and created the Broadway music and starred in it. And she's been doing this for a long time, sings in front of thousands of people. She was on the podcast with Glennon and Abby, and she said, oh yeah, well I just get, the world makes me nervous. I just feel, this is someone who performs in front of thousands of people. I find it very frightening. So when I went to college, I did a study abroad program, and I went to Italy, and I did a whole year of study there, and I came back, and UCLA said I needed to call the program in Italy to get my credits. She said, that just terrified me, so I just did a whole nother year of school. So she did 5 years of school because she was too afraid to call Italy. Now, for some people, that just seems weird. But for other people, it's a real thing, being really afraid. And she deals with anxiety. And so in the podcast, she talked about her anxiety. She talked about going on medication to help her manage these very intense emotions that she had. And she very freely cried on the show as she was upset about something, and someone else then talked about their concern about being on medication, and the greatest concern that they were sharing about being on medication was that they were going to lose who they were, that the medication was going to dull their sense of self, and they both were saying that absolutely wasn't true, that they actually felt more in touch with who they were because this stuff got out of the way. But what happened by her sharing so vulnerably and openly on this podcast, thousands of people just responded because they felt seen and they felt heard for their anxiety or whatever their mental health issues are. And I'm saying they, but all of this life, every one of us has our stuff. It might be different person to person, but we all have it. And it's important to recognize this, because when we say thank you, God, and there's only one power and it's all good and it just keeps unfolding and unfolding, that's only with the idea if we have a very small idea of what good is. But when we recognize, just in that moment, by Sarah talking about her, and then she came on, she actually created her own video of thank you, because she just got swarmed with so many people, and she felt loved and connected. Everybody felt more connected with each other. There was the softening of heart and this deep and rich connection. Oneness comes in through the back door. Sometimes it doesn't come in through the front door where someone's saying, you're one, do this. It comes in through the vulnerability and the softness. We feel more connected than we ever feel. Oneness. It's good. There's healing happen. That's all, this whole planet is about healing. Reverend Ernest Holmes said that there's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed. That this oneness already exists, and what healing is this revelation that we're not separate. We are not separate from one another. That's all this healing. And so the pain, if you're doing a physical exercise and you have pain, to know that you're still one, that you can talk about it, as Ray talked about his injuries and how that helped him. Always, the stuff that seems the hardest can be the very thing that heals our separation from ourselves, from our divine being, and from others. It's a life of infinite goodness, a goodness that does not end. And so we get to our final step, which is release and let go. That when we're living a life of prayer, we're not trying to force anything. We're consciously recognizing it, but we're also surrendering. We're letting go. We're not trying to control how it shows up, how this good is going to show. When Sarah shared her vulnerability, she wasn't saying, okay, now I'm going to control and make sure everyone feels connected over this. She just let it go. She just poured her heart out there and she let it go. She surrendered. If the universe is always good, if it is infinite, it'll start showing up. We don't have to make it happen. It's one of the most powerful tools you're going to hear every mystic, whatever your journey is, every spiritual teacher, that what we're really doing is constantly letting go, because we have these layers that protect us, that separate us from each other and from the divine source within our being. And the more we let go, and the more we let go, and more we let go, as Jack's song so beautifully revealed today, that the more we let go, the more good shows up in our life. This always already good. In the midst of the most unlikely circumstances and the most difficult situations of your life, in the good stuff, in the bad stuff, it's everywhere. It has no limit. There's this wonderful song that we sing, written by Reverend Michael and his former music director, Ricky Byers, called I Release and I Let Go. And the words are, I release, I let go. I let the Spirit run my life. My heart is open wide, for I'm only here for God. Just walking around, I love singing that when I walk around. It's rather than perseverating on an idea, I release and I let go, we just let it go. Because we can trust a universe that is always good. We can trust that the power, the real power, not the human power, but the real power is always good. It knows us intimately. It knows every one of us intimately. So the voice that shows up for you is going to be different than the voice that shows up for me, because it is that loving. It's not like a generic, here's my voice for everybody. It's that loving that is uniquely showing up for you, and it's good. And you can trust it, but you can't hear it unless you open your heart and let it in. So this whole way of living a life of prayer is about opening your heart, softening your heart, letting the walls go down. There's a concept called undefended love, just letting the walls go down. That doesn't mean in the human world that there are people who want to hurt us, or we need to set boundaries and all of those things, but that all can be done with love. And that's what we start to know. It's love is infinite. So even if I put a boundary up, when I remember there was I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and there's one young gentleman there who was hearing voices, and at this point he had just come in, and these voices were very violent, and they were telling him to hurt people, and he couldn't make them stop, but he was being aggressive. So two of the male nurses had to go in and restrain him from hurting himself and other people, because he was physically acting out. But I can tell you, there was not one judgmental thought. Compassion everywhere. How can we help him? What can we do to help this young man find peace, to care for him? So in the restraining, which is a physical way of saying a boundary, creating a boundary, we want to stop you from doing this, but we love you. We care about you. Everything is in this love. Everything is in this goodness. There's nothing that is ever outside of it, ever. And so we keep our hearts wide open, even if we have to create boundaries, even if we say, no, that's not okay, even if we have opinions about what's happening, most of us do, about what's happening in the world. Have our opinions. I love the way Glennon puts it. I have strong opinions and I hold them loosely. Like I show up and I have my opinions, but at the same time, I can be open with my heart space. I don't have to shut my heart down. If there's somebody that you feel is really closed-minded and you're very angry at their closed-mindedness, guess what? You're not going to allow yourself to heal the closed-mindedness in you, because you find it so appalling that someone would be closed-minded, that would be cruel. Guess what? You're going to think it's so appalling that you have any cruelty in you. You're going to be disgusted with any part of yourself that is closed-mindedness. How is that healing? If we can't show other people some generosity of spirit in our heart, doesn't mean we can still take action, but if we don't spiritually have generosity of heart, we will not have generosity of heart for our own healing. And remember, all healing is the revelation that there's only one power and one presence. And so in me, even that part of me that's closed-minded, even me that's not nice, I have to approach that part of me with love, with tenderness and gentleness. One power, one goodness, one love for ourselves, for all the planet. This is what a life of prayer is. And that life doesn't end when we leave here. We know a lot of fear comes up often about the other side because we haven't seen it. But the more we start connecting with the infinite on this side of the planet, the more we feel trust and safety that on the other side it continues to grow and evolve. I love Yogananda. He had, I think it was in Autobiography, he describes Earth as, the hot air balloons, the little basket part, that's Earth. And then this next dimension that you go into, that people like heaven, if you see it like heaven or energy and light, that's the hot air balloon. He said, it's just so much bigger than this world that we're in is so small compared to the world that we're going to. And that's goodness. We're just going into this vast sea of goodness. He says it's so beyond this little tiny basket. And then beyond this balloon is the vast sky. That's the next dimension. Like his vision, chapter 43, Autobiography of a Yogi, is so vast, and when you read it, you realize, we're just on this very small part of a huge journey. We have so far to go to have infinite patience with ourselves and to recognize that when our beautiful beings who are now on the other side of the veil, they are growing and expanding still into this greater goodness. One of the traditions, and I've never really felt comfortable with it, is they need our prayers on the other side, and I'm thinking, I think they're way more clearer over there than we are here. But I'll pray, but I still think they know more than I do at this point. I'm a little bit deferential to the people on the other side, beings on the other side of the veil. In fact, I was listening to a interview with Bono, who's just come out with a book called Surrender, and it was on NPR, and he said his father used to say to him, "You're a baritone who's always singing like a tenor." And he said, yeah, that would be accurate. That was my personality. I'm always punching above my weight, is the way he put it. I'm always going beyond where I'm supposed to be going. I don't like people telling me I have a limit, so of course I'm trying to sing like a tenor. And then he said when his father transitioned, he said, it was like suddenly my voice went higher. It was like this gift given to him. He said, I believe when people go to the other side of the veil, they give us a gift. And they continue to give us this beautiful gift if we open to it. They're there saying, here's a gift. Life never ends. These beautiful beings are with us. Earlier this month, I was talking about icons. Do you all remember icons when we were talking about that? So the idea of an icon is that it's an image, and it's not that you worship the image, the material form. You're connecting with the thing the image represents. And so I'm thinking other of you have had this experience as well. But I think I really cherish this idea only because I've experienced it. I've experienced it with a statue. I've experienced it with a picture of my grandmother where suddenly I was just looking at the picture and suddenly she was very alive and in the room. And I've experienced it with icons in the Orthodox tradition. I don't even know who they are. There's all these saints, and it's not my tradition, so I don't know who they are, but I was left in a room with all these images, and that room was alive. They were there. There's no limit to this goodness. There might be a veil in our human perception, but spiritually, right now, we are infinite beings. There's only one power, one presence, and it is infinite. It has no limits. There's no place where it stops and something else begins. So right now, even in this room, as we open up to these beautiful faces, and we have some that aren't standing up, but these beautiful beings who are on the other side of the veil, who've touched our lives in some way. If you have people on your phone, if your picture isn't up here, or at home, or in your heart, an image or images of people that you treasure, that are on the other side of the veil, they're part of our infinite good. They're part of this all power that is always for us, that is gifting us. So as we shift now into this beautiful, we know that tomorrow is All Hallows Eve. We're also in the season of the Day of the Dead, All Saints Day, All Souls Day. Kathy was telling me there's a day similar to this in Sweden, and she couldn't say their name because it was in Swedish. There's something that's very alive in this planet right now with these beings on the other side of the veil. One of the things when we do memorial services, we often like to call them celebration of life services, that we don't want to be depressed because we know that these beings, however they just left this planet, their souls are continuing to expand in good. And they are continuing to connect with us because there's no walls in the infinite. So during this holy and sacred time, I'd like us to take a moment, and whoever, if you've brought if multiple people, one people, and by the way, pets, animals, I should also say thank you, Reverend Kathy Sharma and John Sharma, for creating this beautiful, beautiful table. It's gorgeous. To close your eyes and just turn within and remember a gift or gifts that these people, beings, have given you very personally and specifically. And it could be a gift that's specific, like Bono with the voice. It could be something that they gave to you when they were on this earth. It could be a generic gift, just kindness, love. So you can be as specific or general, because even if it's general, it's specific to your relationship with this person or people. So let's just take a moment and know that they are in this room now. There's no walls that we call forth. We call forth these beautiful beings. We recognize that they are still with us, that their lives are eternal and infinite, that they have no beginning and no ending. And as our hearts are open into the infinite, we allow ourselves to connect. What is the gift that this being has given to us? Or beings have given to me? What is this person or people or plant or animal given to me? And as you're clear about what that gift is, I invite you to say thank you to this presence right now, to this being. So much love, so much generosity of giving. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We receive it. We feel it. And let's make a silent little commitment to this beautiful being that we will continue to honor this gift that they have given us as we move into the rest of our life. We will never forget. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as we continue to feel the gift of of what they have given us, what do we want to give them? What blessing do we want to give them from our heart? Right now, what is that blessing that we want to give to these beautiful beings on the other side? Our family members, our loved ones. What do we offer them? When we listen to our heart, we can be surprised by what shows up.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say.